want to talk about heroes tonight. Your heroes, your wives are heroes, your kids are heroes. We all stand on the shoulders of tens of thousands, actually millions of heroes who have served our country. When I was a kid growing up a long time ago in Boston, very working class background, everyone in my life, every man in my life had served in the U.S. military. They were either World War II vets or they were Korean War vets at the time. I get a little older, and the sons and daughters, or the sons and grandsons really of the men that I grew up with were fighting in Vietnam. You know, I think it's frankly a disgrace for what our country did to our veterans of that war. Turned their back on those veterans, and it's gratifying to me that people like us, younger than them for the most part, have not forgotten the tremendous sacrifice of our Vietnam veterans. But all of them, as I remember growing up, whether it was the World War II Marines or the Korean War II personnel or the Korean War guys or the Vietnam War guys, it was funny when you talk to them. They very seldom, really talk to the terrible battles they'd been in, and whether it was the Battle of Midway or Guadalcanal or landing in Normandy, the terrible war in Korea, or all of those millions of jungle engagements in Vietnam. They never really talked about those kind of things, but they talked about their friends, they talked about their buddies, they talked about the men and women that they'd served with. It's typical of us, though. We don't do anything in our lives individually. We do everything together, those of us that serve in the U.S. military. But there were amazing men and women, those that came before us, just as you are, amazing men and women that serve the nation today, whether you're in uniform or not. What we do is not a job, it's not a career. In general, I would describe it more as a vocation. We never should be fair in what we do, in the way we train, in the way we organize for what we do, because our stock and trade, protecting our nation in war, is not fair. What we do, and many of you know this, up front and personal, what we do is the most brutal and unforgiving of all human endeavors that exist on this earth, and is so long as war is part of the human experience, we need to have the best of American society trained to dominate it, and we will and should accept nothing less than perfection on the battlefield, and that's what you're all about. It is our sacred duty as our nation's warriors, because the fate of our nation depends on strong men and women who will stand firm when the danger is greatest and assault to the objective and take the fight to anyone so foolish as to bring it to our shores. And I talk a lot and I interact a lot with civilian organizations, and I get the question, why do they join? Why did you join after the 9/11 attack in particular? Because all of us knew that what was in our future was war. To fight an enemy that is as vicious today as we've ever fought in our lives, a war, I believe, that will continue for decades to come. This fact may be inconvenient to some, but it is a fact. Our enemy, and you know this, our enemy has an illogical hatred for who we are, for how we live our lives, for the toleration that we have for each other, to live their lives in the way that they want to live them, to worship and believe any God that we as individuals want to worship, the way we raise our children in the privacy of our homes, in safety and without fear. That's what we are as Americans. These cruel and heartless Islamic terrorists that you've met on the battlefield so frequently, all they want is to see our destruction. It drives them crazy. They hate us in the way that we treat each other, that we believe that all men and women are created equal in the eyes of God and under the law, and that no man has a right to tell another man how to live his life. that it's not about oil or our support for Israel. It's about us as a people. He is irreconcilable, this enemy we fight. He is totally unwilling to compromise on the issue. He will not negotiate. The only alternative for men like him is he needs to be killed. And men and women like us that are here tonight, backed up by our families, are more than willing to grant him his best wish and send him to hell. And again, I get this question all the time when I interact with civilians in particular. Why in the hell would any kid step forward and do what we do? Why would they not stay home with the rest of American society, the other 99%? But you know, you could ask the same question about the 42 million Americans that have served our country in uniform since the very beginning of our republic. And like them, most of us simply serve honorably, do our duty, and return home like our fathers and grandfathers did, to simply live our lives, to raise our children, and to believe in America. The fact is, you are simply superb on the battlefield. And there's great comfort, I think, and I believe this among our countrymen who don't really understand who we are, but they are comforted by the fact that they know that we are not born killers, but we're simply decent young men and women who throughout our history, but most recently in Iraq and Afghanistan, and who knows where else next tomorrow, we've performed extraordinary acts of bravery and selflessness to a cause that we have decided is bigger and more important than ourselves. And like all that have gone before us in uniform, America owes us a debt that can never be repaid for protecting everything Americans hold dear. That any one of us could have done something more self-serving with our lives, but no, we chose to serve. That to us it was more important to fulfill the most basic and cherished responsibility of a citizen, the defense of one's country. It was more important for us to do that than to see to our immediate well-being. We are the very best, you are the very best that this country produces. And we've put every American ahead of ourselves. That every American owes us a debt that can never be repaid. The funny thing is, we don't expect to be repaid because it's enough for us to have worn the uniform, to have served alongside the best men and women on the planet, and to have done our duty. Our pride, our reward, our legacy is one of selfless valor. The country we live in, the way we live our lives and allow our neighbors to live their lives, the mutual respect we have for each other, and the very freedoms our countrymen too frequently take for granted. You know, there are some citizens today, some of our people criticize the younger generation. I don't. The younger generation in our country simply lives the lives that they've been told are important from Hollywood or from the commercials on TV. But those of us that joined, particularly our young people that joined, and as I say, particularly after 9/11, are very, very different than all the rest. I don't know where we get them. I don't know why they keep coming, but I thank God every day that they do. And while serving in this war, and yes, sometimes dying for us, we all learned what America used to hold as absolutely a common truth to our core, that the real strength of any group, of a platoon, a battalion, a people, or a country, is not based on worshiping at the altar of diversity or separateness. On the contrary, we've learned by experiencing firsthand what all of our immigrant ancestors learned when they came here. When they left their motherland without hope, and they came here to forge a nation that is full of hope, they've learned that we are best when we are stitched together as a people. We know this in the U.S. military like no other institution in our country understands, that we are better as Americans when we are stitched together as a people by a shared sense of history, values, customs, hopes, and dreams. Those are the things that unite us. We're not, certainly in our military, a selfish gaggle of hyphenated or multicultural Americans. We are just Americans. We've learned to our DNA the fundamental truth upon which this country was made great, that it's not about the color of skin, but about who you are within. That it's not about where in the world you came from, but all about why you came. That it's not about the God you worship, but that you will respect and even fight for the right of your neighbor to venerate any God he or she damn well pleases. That it's not about being an individual, it's not just about individual achievement, but all about achieving together as a people for the common good. That there is an exceptionalism about us as Americans, and that we should cherish that and never ever apologize for it. And what of the families? And some of them are here tonight. I'm one of them. And what of the families who raised and nurtured the young people today into adulthood? These families are special. And frequently, in my own case, with two sons who were Marines, I was just as confused when they walked up and said to me, individually, 2 years apart, I want to join the Marines. I want to do my part. Like every American family who's ever had that experience, the only thing you think to yourself is, where in the hell did that come from? Because everything in our society is counter almost to the sense of service to the nation. Where the hell did that come from? Why do they keep coming? I don't know, but I pray and thank God every day that they do. And aside from everything else these families have to deal with and endure, every one of them are overwhelmingly proud of the decision of their young kid to serve, of their commitment, of their actions on the battlefield, if unfortunately they have to go to war, and so many have. These families are so proud they step forward when so many others in our society never even considered it. Proud that by this very one personal decision to serve a cause higher than themselves, regardless of the outcome to them personally, they gave meaning to, I believe, the two most important questions that over the centuries have defined the dedication of free and righteous men and women in the fight against wickedness. The questions, if not me, Dad, who? If not now, Mom, when? And if we did not have citizens willing to ask, not only ask those questions, but to act on them, we would have no doubt lost our struggle for independence against the British Empire. Slavery may never have been eradicated from our shores, and the rights of all Americans under the law may still be just a dream. The Nazis would have triumphed. The death camps never liberated or eliminated. Untold millions never saved from gas chambers. Communism would never have been thrown onto the dustbin of history. And today, the high tide of Islamic intolerance and extremism, an empire of hate that Osama bin Laden himself proclaimed would last forever, was counted only in days after 9/11, once our country woke up to the danger and took to fight them on their home turf. That is the kind of young person that comes from the 1% of our society, 1% of our society that serves the country in uniform. And these families are as proud of their having stepped forward as they are brokenhearted if God takes them. And what their families, what your families really never saw, but those of us who have served together saw every single day, is how they, without hesitation, left the wire, climbed onto helicopters, went out on patrol. They did it, you did it, as if you were born to it. We're indestructible, we're without fear. You learned early, however, as anyone who has truly experienced combat does, that fear, and maybe in particular your organization, your people, EOD, that fear is with you all the time. You know firsthand how random combat is, how you have almost no control of what happens as to whether you live or die. What can happen to you, or just importantly, to your best friend or one of your men in an instant. But every day, they go nonetheless. All of us, I believe, have seen it up close, the kind of things that can happen to us or our friends in war. All of the things our countrymen have done over the years. We go because we are courageous. We go because of our country, because of our flag, because of our national anthem, but most importantly, we go because of our brothers and sisters who serve with us. And the fear out there is constant, you know that. It's all-consuming at times, it's constant. But we push through it. We do our duty regardless of the danger, because that is what every one of us came to do. We understand that as our duty. Our parents, our loved ones never saw that in us growing up, but those of us who served together saw it each and every day. And I will just end with a thought. There are Gold Star families here tonight. I wanted to leave, I wanted to leave with a letter. The last letter I wrote, a Gold Star family. A few years ago, we had a memorial service in Miami, and I met the father of a Army Ranger who had only been 2 months in the grave at the time. And I wrote a letter to him. It's very similar to many of the letters I've written. But I know there's a recent Gold Star family here tonight. There's other Gold Star families. If you, I know you try to imagine what it must be like to have lost a son or a daughter in combat. Even though they were your close buddies, even though they were very, very good friends of yours. But it's a very, very unique experience that these families have. And I just wanted to share with them, more than with the crowd, my thoughts on the loss of their son. I wrote, "It is an absolute honor to have met you and your daughter yesterday here at Southcom. Thank you for coming and spending time with us. I know where you are in all of this, in this loss, and there's nothing I can do, there's nothing anyone can do to take the unbelievable sadness you are suffering away from your heart. There are no words that can help. I know that. But what we have, fathers like us, what we have are the wonderful memories of our sons as little boys, as adolescents, and most of all, watching them throughout their lives growing into decent and wonderful young men. Young men with a purpose, with character, and dedicated to a cause much, much larger than themselves. Very few fathers can say that. Perhaps only 1% of us. In my many hundreds of trips to military hospitals since the war started, every parent would ask, as we stood together beside their sons and daughters, lying so terribly injured, was it worth it? Was it worth it for their son or daughter to have lost a leg, 2 legs, all 4 limbs? I could never answer those questions because it was not my precious son so terribly hurt, lying in that bed, nor my child facing so many challenges ahead of them and for the rest of their lives. I couldn't answer. And in the dozens of funerals I have attended, or the hundreds of meetings I have had with the families of the fallen around the nation before I lost my own son, the question was always the same: was it worth his life? Again, I could not answer. I did not know how to. From the moment the casualty officer knocked on my front door on 9 November 2010 until I stood at my son's grave at Arlington on 22 November, I struggled endlessly with the same question: was it worth it? Was it worth his life to be sacrificed even on the altar of America's freedom and safety? I was never able to answer that question, because that day when they were folding his flag so lovingly over his grave, it came to me that that is not my question to answer. That it did not matter what I thought, but only what he thought. The answer was his to give, and he gave it by his actions, by his life, by joining the Marine Corps to serve his country when we were at war, by fighting to be an infantryman, by working relentlessly to be the best lieutenant he could be so he could lead his men through the hell that most of us know as combat. When my boy fell, he was exactly where he wanted to be, doing exactly what he wanted to do, surrounded by the best men on this earth, his Marines and his Navy doc. That was his answer. And although I have come to realize that I will never ever get over his loss, that I will forever miss him as you will, and that this sadness will never go away, I take comfort in the fact that neither will my pride. I hope your son Andrew helps you find the answer to the question I know is in your heart. Listen to him. God bless you and Semper Fidelis. I thank you for the privilege, the honor of talking to you here tonight. I don't have to say this to you, but I will never, ever, ever forget the men and women you served alongside. Never, ever forget the men and women that never came home. Never forget their families. Thank you so very much, and Semper Fidelis.